It is a privilege to take care of a loved one who did so much for you and who you literally owe your life. So, should you feel guilty when you want to run away from caregiving? Stay tuned for a frank, casual conversation with my cousin, Dr. Jocelyn Brown, and hear her approach to the care of my favorite aunt, Aunt Mildred. Stay tuned.
Advanced Balance podcast with Dr. Ince emphasizes the interdependence and importance of a healthy mind, body, and soul.
Okay. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Advanced Balance podcast. Today we have Dr. Jocelyn Brown from Boulder, Colorado, to talk about caregiving and her role as a primary caregiver to her mother suffering from advanced Alzheimer's. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Brown has a PhD in theater from the University of Colorado, Boulder, is a playwright, a business owner of Brown and Sons Publishing, a former model, a mother of twin boys, and grandmother to, 10 going on 11 children, grandchildren? And 9 going on 10. Oh, okay. But in the context of this interview, she is the daughter of Dr. Mildred Brown, a retired educator. Now, there is one statistic that said that 1 in 4 women aged 45 to 65 have provided care or assistance to a family member or friend in the past 30 days, and that is 1 in 5 men. So caregiving is a very common in a certain age group. We call it the sandwich generation. And I want to start off with a question from Desi from Miami. How do you take care of yourself, your physical health and mental health, while trying to take care of your mother?
Yes, that's a good question. And that's probably the hardest part of the caregiving is fitting in personal needs and personal care. And so I've had to get very creative and definitely use off hours because so much of the day hours are taken up with providing not only physical care and emotional care, but then there's also the other component as a live-in caregiver of having to manage the household, and then of course as my mother's power of attorney, there's another whole component of managing all of her affairs. So it goes far beyond the day-to-day just caregiving. And so because of that triple role, is not just being the caregiver, but also the power of attorney and also the household manager. So I've got to find time to do laundry and cook and clean and shop and all those things that a typical caregiver coming from outside would not have to do all of that. They would just spend that time with the patient. So within my role, I've had to get super, super creative and find ways in and around all of those hours to take care of myself. And I can give you specifics if you want what I've been doing.
Yes. So tell me, I'm sure there are some times you just want to run away,
Yes.
as one of our listeners from Houston said, what do you do when you just want to run away?
Yes, well, that's a pretty much a daily response to the onslaught is run. So when I feel like I have to run away, I think I really have to rely really heavily on my relationship with God because
Okay.
it takes such a huge effort to reset every day. And so there's a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, a lot of crying, and reaching out to neighbors when I can and other people who are nearby, so that when I get that or fight or flight response, I have something to latch onto, to hold on to, because yes, the tendency to want to flee is strong, particularly when you've been doing it as long as I have, which is going on 6 years. So, and then of course that response gets stronger each year.
How did you come to the decision to have your mother move in with you? Was she agreeable with this idea, or was she resistant to the plan?
Well,
And
at the
and what
time,
stage of the dementia was she at that time?
yeah, when it all came to a head and I had to actually go in and go rescue her, so to speak, from Florida, she was amenable. But we had talked for several years about what it would look like for her to come live with me if she ever decided to leave Florida and come live with me in Colorado. We talked about what that would look like. Unfortunately, when everything came to a head, it didn't look like what we had planned. So the plan was for her to come to live with me in the mountains, and we'd spend the days just talking and walking and growing things in the garden and, just living out those last days that way. And then when the reality of it hit, I realized I could not bring my mother to the mountains. In her physical and her mental state, we were just too far away from resources and supports. And it was just too remote and rugged for her to continue with her normal routines, like, getting fresh air and going for a walk. That's not possible for in the mountains easily. So yes, things changed, and I ended up having to find a place for her in the flatlands, and I ended up having to close up my house and move in with her.
Okay, so I've often said that this journey is just highly personal, and it's like it's a well-kept secret, how are things taken care of at the end of life. I'm still of that opinion that, it's a pretty individual process. My mother was very independent, but it was obvious to everyone that she was beyond the point of living by herself at age, 95, 96, and the pandemic hit, and I had to drive down to Huntsville and pick her up and take her to my home. And within a few weeks, she told everyone it was her idea, but it's definitely not an easy decision to make. When is it that your loved ones are beyond being independent? Um, so I understand that you write articles and that you're an advocate on behalf of people like your mother. Uh, and what is it that you would like for casual strangers or well-intended friends that are visiting? What would you like for them to know about your mother, or what is it that you'd like for them maybe to avoid in their interactions with your mother?
Gotcha. Well, when I realized the depth of this role that I was in, because at the time that I brought my mother here, it was also open ended. I had no idea how long I would be in this role or how far this would go. So as I started going further and further down the rabbit hole, I started really educating myself. Realizing that, aside from personal experience, I had no formal education with Alzheimer's. So I began to get educated and got a bunch of certifications in Alzheimer's care, advanced caregiving, assisted living management, joined the National Caregivers Association, joined the Alzheimer's Association, got
Oh,
into
okay.
symposiums and panels and classes. And but to go back to your question, can you refresh me? What was the question about? What would I like people to know?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
one of the things that I learned is that the things that we think are helpful for people living with Alzheimer's are not usually helpful at all. And one of the most important things is that our job is to create a very safe space mentally and physically for these people. And what most people don't realize about Alzheimer's is that it is very, very stressful for someone living with Alzheimer's to try to remember things. But that's a natural inclination for people coming into that space. And this is what I learned in all of my training, is that we want to try to bring that person back to a place where they are a part of our lives, but they're no longer. So we have to meet them at their level. We have to become part of their lives. And then that's when we realize we can't drag them through personal memories. And, a lot of times we want them to remember, do you remember when we did this together? Do you remember so-and-so? Do you remember how much we loved raspberries? They cannot remember. And the strain of trying to remember is more harmful than just letting them be wherever they are in their minds, in their memories, where they are at that moment. So yeah, that's one of the most important things I think someone approaching someone with Alzheimer's can learn, is that you really can't try to pull them into your world and your memory base. You have to go into their world.
Okay. Okay. So instead of going up to your mother and saying, Aunt Mildred, don't you remember me? I'm your favorite niece.
And in her mind, she's struggling to say, I don't know what that all means. So yes, those are the things that, yeah, we tend to avoid with people with Alzheimer's.
Okay. And I understand that speaking loudly is sometimes not necessary, although I have a story about that as well. So my mother started turning up the TV higher and higher and higher. And that was her main form of entertainment in her last years. So we knew that she had a hearing problem, but and she was very not cooperative, and even, you know, it seemed like her memory was going down quickly. Well, we took her to the ENT doctor, and they pulled out a lot of wax. Suddenly she could hear, and her disposition improved. So, from what I understand, hearing can affect dementia or dementia type symptoms. So it's
Yes.
important to get that one. So,
Yeah.
in your research, Jocelyn, what resources are available for people not just in the Colorado area, but in other areas of
Mhm.
the country for someone like yourself, the primary caregiver?
Yes. The number one go-to resource for people who are taking care of someone with Alzheimer's is the Alzheimer's Association. They're national, and there are chapters all around the country.
Resources. Alzheimer's Association is a great resource. ALZ.org. ALZ.org. There's a great caregiving guide at AARP.org.
They really take you under their wing, pull you into their cache of resources that they have. And it's quite a bit. Um, they, at least in my area, they will actually come out and meet you at your home
Oh,
and
okay.
hug you and give you hugs. And they put you in touch with all their different support groups. I joined their advocacy program. There's a national advocacy program, which is really more political than
Mm-hmm.
anything. And it's, trying to influence, our government to
Mm-hmm.
increase supports for people living with Alzheimer's. The Alzheimer's Association is the number one go-to source for starters, but hopefully, depending on the city, we're at our city, we're very well funded and resourced. So, I have to be very grateful for that. But in every city, there should be some type of area council on aging. So when I became a
Okay.
board member for I'm sorry, am I going on too much?
Oh, no, no.
Okay. I was just going to say when I became a board member for the Aging Advisory Council, they have so many resources because they actually have this oversight over the entire city, I guess any city, and they put caregivers in touch with support groups, respite care, which is what I've taken advantage of, the volunteer respite program. They'll put you in touch with um, uh, funding if you need funding. There's some people just, as our parents age and they begin to outlive their savings, there are all kinds of resources where you can get extra help from. So yeah, there's quite a bit out there, and they're always working hard to try to create a central database for all of this. But it takes some time and research, but it's out there.
Okay. So, do you have any other tips on how, well, I think this is maybe a little personal question, but has the caregiving affected your health that you can tell?
It has. And one of the biggest issues that I'm working on is trying to take better care of myself,
Mhm.
particularly as a diabetic. So yes, my health has declined in certain ways. And I realize that you have to take care of it on the spot. For a lot of us, we think we'll wait until after everything is over and then we'll start to take care of ourselves. But then you wait, it could be too late. And
Right.
so, yeah,
Yes.
I have to work very hard at figuring out ways to keep my own health strong
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
my mother's care is only as good as my health.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Right. So I'm a medical doctor, physician, and often I would have patients like you saying, "Oh, I don't have time to go to the doctor. I have to take care of my mother or take her to the doctor." And so what I would say is that, if something happens to you, what's going to happen to the person you're supposed to be taking care of?
Exactly.
And it's to me, it's almost it's not minor, but it's major issues like if if you can't leave your mother to take that 20-minute walk 3 times a day, that's not good.
Right.
Or if you're up late at night, night after night after night, that probably I'm asking you, is there
Well,
any way around it or
that's the tricky part. And I've had to actually, increase my own medication in order to avoid some of these situations. I've struggled. What happens is that you are like any, I guess, a new parent, you are on call 24/7. So you stay mentally on call. And so my sleep has suffered. And so I'm finding that I can't get more than 4 or 5 hours sleep comfortably. And so, I've had to, of course, my doctors had to give me sleep medications and things like that. Um, but
I'm about to interview a sleep expert. I may ask that question.
yes, what to do
Any
about sleep.
advice for caregivers?
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah,
including new parents.
right. Yes. How do you get enough sleep? Because you're right. It's like being on an airplane. If you have to save yourself first so that you can save the person next to you, you're dependent. So it's tricky,
Huh,
very tricky.
okay. Is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know about especially about your research of care of the agent? And if you can tell us a story or two about your mother, how you integrated your background in theater and music in her care.
Oh, sure. With my mother, and you're right, it's a very individual process working with someone in a caregiving role when you're in a caregiving role. And for my mother, um, her one her one connection, and it's very strong, had been to music and
Okay.
movement. So I created a movement and music program, sort of, at home. which means that, it involves seated dancing and lots of singing. So that was her one connection. And I think for all caregivers, you do have to find that one thing that keeps your parents or whoever you're taking care of connected. And when you find that connection for them, then that will change the quality of their lives, because then you can just focus on that. And for me, coming from a theatrical background, it was easy because I taught students for so many years in these areas. So it wasn't that difficult to put together something that would, really keep my mother engaged. And the one thing I would say for many people is you don't have to overthink it, because when a person is living with dementia or Alzheimer's, you can present the same program over and over, and it's always new to them. So, that takes away from some of the pressure of having to prepare, anything formal. So, yes, I would say that the trick is to find your particular patient's whatever brings them that happiness and engagement. Find out what that is and focus on that.
Okay. All right. I looked at a couple of tips from the Alzheimer's Association. It says go to bed, sleep half an hour earlier, take a short walk outside, try a yoga class, make time
Yeah.
for a hobby you enjoy, and take advantage of the resources out there. So, are there any lessons that you've learned from your mother that you want to pass on to your children about the care of yourself? Another
uh,
personal question.
yes, what I've learned from my mother. Um, well, I think what I've learned from this whole experience is an incredible amount of patience. And it's, I've been doing this for almost 6 years, so I won't lie and say that I came into the experience with that level of patience. There were many days when I had to remove myself and go, I'm not being patient enough. I'm not being, I'm not meeting the need here. And so there was a lot of self-reflection. So it's gotten to the point now where patience is a natural response.
Oh,
And
that's wonderful because at one point, I, we believe that you know in the hereafter, going to heaven, and that if you're not good, you may not make it there. So at one point, I was yelling at my mother. I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it. I'm going to be cursed. I'm going to HELL."
I felt that way
But
too before. There would be
so
times
I
when,
applaud you in your growth. Uh, I think there was a turning point with me as well. It was towards the end. Um, it was towards the end when I
yes,
think she kind of realized I wasn't trying to kill her. I was just trying to care for her and to love her.
it
Yeah.
takes a huge amount of patience dealing with
Mhm.
someone with Alzheimer's, and there's no way around it. Um, One thing I would say is that, and one of the most important things I've learned is that our children learn to take care of us by how they see us taking care of our parents.
You think so?
Yes. And something I've wanting to impart to my own children who are always MIA, is that if you want your children to take care of you well, take care of your parents well, because they see the level of care and love you give. And if they feel that your level of care and love for your own parents is minimal, they will think that's enough for them to provide for you down the road. And so I've learned that yeah, how we view our parents is how our kids are going to view us.
So What if you don't have kids?
If you don't have kids, then there's no one
Still,
really
still needs, I think you still need to have some type of plan for your care in your advanced years.
yes.
I believe that you should make your wishes known to loved ones, or,
Yeah,
what your wishes are. That's
yeah,
important. It's called pre-planning. Yeah.
most definitely.
But
And it
I,
doesn't have to be your own kids. It could be a niece or a nephew or somebody who loves you enough
right,
to step up to the plate.
right. Someone that will tell you when it's time to stop driving.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right, Jocelyn. Dr. Jocelyn Brown, it was great chatting. I pray that something that we've said has inspired caregivers out there. And until we meet again, any last words?
No, I could think only thing I would say is that the best reward is this, that you probably will get into heaven. I was telling Thea that I'm just trying to get into heaven. That's all. Just get right in there. And
I don't know if that's how it works.
it probably doesn't. I know, but
But
we just
God bless you. God bless you, Jocelyn, and may you have joy in the little moments of the day.
thank you.
And God bless your children and your children's children.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Sure.
Thank you, Cousin Jocelyn. I've always said this is a personal and unique journey. In my family's case, the decision to admit my mother to a nursing home turned out to be a blessing. I was able to return to being a daughter from a caregiver. 3 takeaways. Number 1 is a common takeaway from Balansu Balance podcast: grace and mercy. In this case, for the caregiver and the loved one. Take care of yourself and you will be a better caregiver. Number 2, Alzheimer's Association, alz.org, is an excellent resource. Number 3, caregivers, do not be afraid to ask for help, and friends and family offer to help. Oh, and do not stress out loved ones by asking them, do they remember? This is Dr. Christine Ince, wishing you a balanced mind, body, and soul. Please like, subscribe,